life is messy and unpredictable.
Being able to find joy in the weeds of life is so important. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kim, and we are so glad you've joined us as we figure out how to hold joy in one hand and struggle in the other.
Welcome to Joy in the Weeds. Good morning.
And here we are. I think all of us have had a little bit of a weedy morning already, haven't we? Busy.
Yeah.
Busy. Yeah.
What's going on? So, are we looking at me to do the introductions?
Yes.
Okay.
So just so you guys know, they're listening. Sometimes, like when we have guests, sometimes it's someone I found and we've, or I've set it up. Sometimes Kim sets it up. And sometimes both. It just depends. And anyway, so today Kim was the one who got arranged to have Savana here. So I'm going to let you take it over.
So fantastic. How it came about is Savana and I were both at the recent Awaken, which is the young adult conference thing that that we do here in the Carolina Conference. And we just started talking. And at one point she said, being a mother of small children is really hard and it's really beautiful. And so I was like, well, we need to have you on Joy in the Weeds because that's what we talk about.
That's weeds and joy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Savana, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then we will just start talking about motherhood.
Yeah. It's always such an intimidating question. Like, where do I go? I'm Savana. I am married. I live in Asheville. I have 2 little babies. I have a firecracker of a daughter who's 16 months and a squishy little 8-week-old who's so big.
16 months and 8 weeks.
Very close. They're 14 months apart.
That
very close together.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's great.
So what makes it great?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, wait a minute. Before we get into that, I want to know more about Savana's background. Sorry, Kim.
That's okay.
Okay. So my parents worked for the Adventist Conference, so we moved all over when I was a kid and landed in Asheville when I was 17. So my parents taught my husband at the time, who I didn't know. So they kind of set this up, the whole marriage thing. So we met through them. And then I went to Southern. I studied psychology. And then I went to Western and got my master's in counseling. And then when Garen and I got married in 2016, we moved to South Florida and I got my doctorate in clinical psychology. And we always plan on moving back up because my family lives here and Garen's family lives here. My parents moved, so they're in Texas, but my in-laws live like just a couple miles down the road. And then we moved back up in 2020 and I got pregnant in early 2021. And then Pepper, my daughter, was born in October. And then when she was 5 months old, I missed my period.
Oh, wow.
And was unexpectedly pregnant, and I was devastated. And then kind of like wrapped my head around it. And then Mozzie, our son, who we affectionately call Bear, was born in January, just 8 weeks ago. So I'm not really working right now, which is great, but I'll start back pretty soon. So.
Oh, sister, you're working.
I'm
you're
working. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely working. But I will add in another job on top of that, probably pretty soon. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you said when you found out you were pregnant the second time, you were devastated. And we don't want your son, we don't want Bear to hear this because we don't want to, give him any negative messages. But just tell, like, what was that about? What was going on?
Oh man. Yeah, we're just like jumping right into the weeds over here. So
well, I'm the weedy one,
We'll get to the joy, Savana. We'll get there.
Really difficult postpartum experience with my daughter. I didn't really know it at the time. Um, but looking back, I think it was just so much harder than I thought it was going to be. I think there's just such a lack of education around what postpartum experiences are for women. And, I think the focus is so much on the baby, and people come over and want to see the baby and they want to hold the baby and house the baby. And I feel like the mom just kind of gets lost in that a little bit. And even with, you know, doctor's appointments and things like that, I just feel like there's so much focus on the baby, even the mom, right? Like even we're focused on the baby. But so then looking back, I just think I had a lot of emotional roller coasters, and I had a relatively very easy labor and delivery with her, but I pushed for 2 hours, and so my body was just ravaged. It was just like I was so sore, and then my period came back 3 months postpartum, which was really early, and I was exclusively breastfeeding. And so then that was like another thing to put on top of that, like just like getting my hormones back regulated, and I wasn't sleeping, and it was just really, really hard. And I have a lot of support. And so, and it was still really, really hard. And so I feel like right around like the 4.5 to 5 months period was when I started to kind of feel a little bit more like myself. And then I was pregnant. And so it was just like throwing myself right back into, this year-long experience that I'd just been in and felt like I was just kind of coming out of. And then we're like going right back to square one. So it was just really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then also just the thought of like, oh my gosh, I love my daughter so much. There's no way I could love another human like I love her. So yeah, I think it was just it just was overwhelming. It was really, really overwhelming. And it wasn't planned. And I've always been I've lost a lot of that now, but I've always been very type A, and like I want to know what's going on. And this was a wrench in the gears.
It sure was. My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the everyone focuses on the mother, I also had, so my first two are 15 months apart, and then I had my last two were only 11 months apart. So I had three in 2.5 years. So I have lots of empathy for you. I know, like I get it. I hear you.
It's so hard.
But it is especially difficult, I think, if you're kind of like, you're not in full blown postpartum depression. Like if you can't clinically go to, I have postpartum depression, and but you're still just like drowning in a way. There's kind of like this in between, right? Like I'm not all happy, everything's joy, right? And I'm struggling, but I'm also not like, all the way the other direction. And so then you kind of almost feel guilty for not feeling more joyful, right? For not like, at least that was my experience. Like, because I couldn't say, well, no, I couldn't say, hey, I'm.
So
well,
when
there's always those,
sorry,
like,
go ahead.
Like anybody who like hears where you're at, or like when you're out at the store and you have your kids, everybody says, oh, you're just in the sweetest part of life. Like you're living the best days right now, like with your little kids. And I think that there's definitely truth to that, but it also totally skirts over the fact that it is so hard. It is so hard. And you're carrying so much. And like, that's a whole other conversation just about the mental load that you carry throughout the day, and like caring for your family and cooking and cleaning and doing laundry and grocery shopping and blah, 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 like doing all of those things. And then also taking care of these kids while you yourself are still healing and still recovering. So it's just there's so many facets to all of it, and the loneliness. It's just there's so many things.
You're already answering my well. No, those are my questions, because that's what I'm. We say it's hard. We say it's a struggle. And I count myself very privileged that my children were 3.5 years apart, because I don't think I would have survived. So part of the struggle, what I'm hearing, is the loneliness. Part of the struggle is trying to navigate, laundry and groceries and meal plans and
Right.
what else does the struggle look like? Like, what does that look like?
Oh my gosh. There's just so many things. I think that being a default parent is one thing, like just how much specifically I feel like the women in a lot of families carry just by default. So like all of those things, right? Like, what are we going to eat for supper tonight? Where is the food going to come from? We have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Who's going to take the kids to that? Oh, I need to schedule this. So I'm going to call and do that. Like, there's just this ongoing, constant mental list. And then also, like, I feel like, your marriage is so important, and you and your spouse's relationship is modeling for your kids. And so it's such an integral piece. And yet that sometimes feels like another thing to do, right? Like, oh, I'm being a mom to these kids all day long. Oh my gosh. And then I have my husband. So then, like, that has to also be a priority. So it's like all these things are priorities, and then you kind of get lost in that. And I think too, I have so many friends right now who are all in the same phase of life. And one of the things that we constantly talk about is how lonely it is. And like, you have these little kids and you love them like more than you can even express. They are your heart outside of your body. And yet it also feels very isolating, which I'm sure, Beth, you understand that probably even more with 3 so close together. And I heard you talk too some about that experience for you. But yeah, so there's just so many facets. And then that's kind of where the guilt part comes in too, like feeling like I should just be so thankful, and yet I'm like crying all the time, or like I just feel so overwhelmed, or I'm so exhausted. So many things.
So I was just telling Kim before we got on here that I this week has been a week of having a lot of compassion for my younger self. And the reason is I have just started doing childcare for my granddaughter just a couple days a week.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she's 6 months old and she's teething and she's adjusting. Her being is adjusting to solid food, which means, well, I don't need to spell it out. Anyway, if you know, you know. If you don't know, you can imagine. But it's been unbelievable. Like, she came the very first day she came, she had a 2-hour period where she was crying. Let me just say, she was screaming
so hard
because she needed to poop and she couldn't do it. And anyway, but literally the whole entire time I had her, she's either in my arms or I'm doing something with her, right? Like, there was never a moment the entire day where my focus was not 100% on her. And when she left, when I took her back to her mom and dad, and I came home and I walk in the door, Savana, there's baby things and the signs of Charlie every single place in the entire house. My lunch, half eaten, is still sitting on the table.
Totally.
Her lunch, not even
Everywhere.
touched, is sitting there now crusty. You know what baby
Yeah.
cereal crusty turns into? It's like a rock that doesn't want to come off. And every part, and we are having an issue with ants. So ants had found some of those things. So it looks like, the house in a matter of one day looks like, I've never cleaned it before. And I just sat there and was just like, I only had her for a few hours. Like, not 24, not for a week or a month or for 3 months or whatever. And I was exhausted and I was like, it was craziness. And so Kim was asking me if I she asked what did you say, Kim, if I'd had a conversation with my younger self?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did. Like, I was blown away. And I know everyone says, oh, well, I'm not as young as I once was. Oh, like, that has nothing to do with it. It's just ridiculously hard. It is ridiculously hard.
Mhm.
And I only say that to just, certainly
So,
be kind to yourself.
so what does an
Mm.
average day look like for you, Savannah? Like, let's pick a Tuesday. What did last Tuesday look
I
like?
mean, it doesn't even matter. They all kind of look the same, I feel like. So right now I have a newborn,
Right.
and my daughter sleeps on the floor in our room. So she has a mattress in our room. So right now, because I have a newborn, my husband has been sleeping in our room with Pepper because she still wakes up some at night. Last night she didn't. Let's talk
Wow.
about that.
Yay!
That was so wonderful. She
There's
slept
some joy.
like 11 hours and never woke up. And she's been very easy to get back to sleep, but she just likes to know that somebody's there. So she'll wake up and cry, and then Garen will go to her and she'll just like lay down and fall back asleep. But because I have another baby, I don't want them to wake each other up.
Right.
And then I'm going to just be up all night because I'll wake up with both of them. So Garen and I have been sleeping separately for the past couple of weeks, which has worked for us. So I go to bed with Mozzie and then wake up whenever he feeds. And then Pepper is usually up and at him anywhere between 5 and 6:30. So, so she gets up and immediately wants to nurse. I'm still nursing both of my babies. And so I'll do that. And then it's going and making breakfast around probably 6 or 6:30, drinking a bucket of coffee. And my husband goes to work, and honestly, the morning for me is kind of just survival. Trying to get Pepper, dressed and entertained until we get to snack time, and then that's like a designated activity. So then that lasts, anywhere between like 5 and 30 minutes, which is great. So then she does that, and then it's trying to clean up, and then I feel like the whole day we're just trying to survive between, getting things done. I do feel like, I will say, when you said like giving yourself grace and being kind to yourself, I think something that I'm really working on is not feeling guilty for like keeping up with the house. And I read this really great book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, and they talk about that, like doing your chores in front of your kids and getting them engaged and involved in it. So I've been doing that. And then of course you can read other things that say, just spend time with your baby, the dishes will get done another day. So, there's a bunch of different ways to tackle it. But I've been trying to keep up with the house, so we do that for now.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
It probably
days
is.
that you're just going to need to sit with them. And there are days when you need to be like you do it with them
Mhm.
and you get them to do it with you. I don't think it's like, but maybe that's just my personality, but I don't think one thing ever is
Yeah,
every
probably
day.
not. Yeah. I live in that like gray age right now where there's just way too much information.
Yes.
So you can always find both sides of any argument.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you find what
I
works for you. I mean,
totally.
in all of that,
Yeah.
you go, okay, this makes sense for my life
Yeah.
and my children,
Mhm.
and that doesn't.
And I really don't think that there's a right or a
Right.
wrong. Like I think everyone is just doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Anyway, then we get to lunch. So from like 11 to noon, I'm cooking lunch, and I try to get her involved. Sometimes I get frustrated with how messy it gets. But so we do that, and then my husband comes out. We do lunch together. He'll put her down for a nap, which is wonderful. And then either I'll nap with her for like an hour or an hour and a half, or I'll just sit and be alone with the other baby.
I
So
was going to say,
where is
that's
where
not a
is
lot.
Mozzie this whole time? Where is he?
I wear him
That's what I thought.
24/7. He's
That's what I thought.
constantly in the carrier. So he's like my barnacle baby. He's constantly on me. And then when Pepper wakes up, which is around 2, that part is easy because we just go outside, and then we're just outside for most of the afternoon. And then we'll make supper, and Garen will come in, we'll eat. And then we go on a walk, and then we do bath time, bedtime. And that's it.
Yeah, that carrying your son on you like all the time, and that was one thing that struck me when I saw you. Like you had him in his, in his carrier, and then
Mm-hmm.
Pepper was on your hip.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it wasn't easy, like I know that. And yet
Mm-hmm.
you looked so at ease.
Oh, see, that'll just make me sob. Thanks.
It
See, this is going to get us into this whole conversation that you and I had there. I think that is where, like, I am right now in the phase of life that I always dreamt of being in. Like, I love this phase. I love my husband. I love my children so much. I love our home. I love where we are. And so I just really, like, I have prayed to be in this stage my whole life. Like, I've always, even in like our wedding vows, we wrote our own wedding vows, and I was like already writing about our kids because I just couldn't wait to be in this phase.
Wow.
And so it is so wonderful. There's no, like, this morning, when every time Pepper goes to her grandma's house, I like mourn a little bit. Like, I'm so sad that she's gone, because it is so wonderful. It's all of the cliches that people say it is. It is so wonderful, and then it is at the same time like so overwhelming and draining. It's just all of those things amplified. Everything is amplified.
Another thing I saw with you is your ability to self-regulate your emotions is like, there was no, because your little man was crying and he was upset and he was having a hard time, and you were just like, you held him, and I don't know what was going on inside. You seemed so calm. I would never have been calm. I still get upset when babies are crying in the grocery store. It's like, help the baby.
Yeah.
That
It is hard.
Incredible. So what do you
Thank you.
What do you do?
I mean, I've done so much work around that, truthfully, because I think by nature I'm somebody who would explode or like have like a temper or go from 0 to 100 in a really short span of time, because in some respects that's what I was modeled. And I think my mom and my dad, I had a difficult relationship with my dad for a lot of my years in my life. And I've done a lot of work around that. And I remember having a conversation with him, and just saying, like, I just wanted to put the past behind me, and like in the image that I had kind of created of who my dad was away, and like really just like get to know him, and put aside like my anger. And my dad had a really complicated childhood. He was really severely abused, and he never hit any of us at all. And he's the only one of his siblings that didn't abuse his kids. So we were so like lucky.
Yeah.
But I remember him saying, when you have kids, your goal is to do better than what your parents did. And so what he told me is that he did that, like, and he totally did. His goal was to do better than his parents, and so he never hit any of us or touched any of us in that way. But he struggled with anger, and so that was something that I struggled with innately. Like, I could go from 0 to 100 in no time. And that was the thing that I wanted to focus on when I had kids. Like, that was where I wanted to do better, was just try to remain regulated, or at least from the outside, right? Like, be regulated and be calm and gentle, because I think that's what I always wanted.
Yeah.
So for someone out there who does really struggle with that as a young mom, right? Like, what are some of the things that you have done to help yourself with that?
Oh, I mean, therapy. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. Yeah. Therapy. I journaled. I think, like, in the moment, like, that's kind of what I'm thinking of, right? Like, when you're in the grocery store and your kid is screaming bloody murder. A few things. One of them for me is just taking a deep breath, and like, that's really it. Like, just taking a deep breath and trying to focus on, like, how do I want to be intentional in this moment? How do I want to respond? How do I want, like, my kids to remember me as responding by? So that's one thing. And I heard this like cheesy quote a while ago, but it was so helpful for me just to remain in, like, putting things in perspective. And it was, on the days when you're struggling the most with your kids, pretend like you're coming back from the future and you have 24 hours with your baby, and you only have these 24 hours. I know, right? It really was helpful for me, because this time is so fleeting and it's so hard. The days are long and the years are short. It's what everybody says. And it's so true. I can't even believe that Tupper is already 16 months. It blows my mind. And it's gone by in a blink of an eye. And so that for me is really helpful to remember, like, I'm just going to pretend like I only have 24 hours. And it's like instantaneously, it changes how you approach your baby, because they're your baby and they won't be your baby for forever. So that for me has been really helpful, like just shifting my perspective to remember that this time is so small in the grand scheme of things, but also like so crucial in terms of their development and just as a family, like a young family. So I feel like those two things, like taking a deep breath and trying to remind yourself how you want to be perceived or how you want to be intentional. And then also just reminding yourself, reframing, like taking it minute by minute.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't always get it right though.
Well,
I felt like I needed to say that. I'm not perfect. I'm not always calm.
well,
You know what? There was one point, in working through being a parent.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the moment when it dawned on me that the times that my parents, or that I was not the way I always wanted to be, right? Where I did lose it, or I was angry or whatever.
Yeah.
When I could come back and say I was sorry, that I shouldn't have been that way.
Yeah.
And then handle it in a way that someone should handle it when they have been inappropriately angry or whatever,
Yeah.
was also a teaching moment that my child wouldn't otherwise have. And it's even more beautiful coming from a parent that they have a connection with. And, don't get me wrong. If we all need to be going to therapy. I am 100% supportive of going to therapy, because the goal is we do it less and less and less and less. And we handle and we show them every day, day in and day out, how to handle their emotions in a appropriate way. However, the facts are we all are human and we have moments. And so, but there is something beautiful about children being able to learn about those. If they've never, ever, ever experienced something less than perfection in their parents, they lose a big opportunity. So
oh my gosh,
I'm not saying go be intentionally bad. I'm just saying don't, use those opportunities to,
No,
and understand that that's still a beautiful opportunity.
I remember as a kid, my mom always saying, I'm still learning too. I'm still growing too. And that's something that I'm trying to like remind my kids about too, is like just how you're growing right now and you're learning. I'm the same. Like I'm still growing and still learning. And every stage of life, I look up to the next phase, right? And think, oh, they've got it all figured out. They've got it all together. And then you get there and then you have imposter syndrome and you're like, wait a second, I thought by now I would know what to do or what to say or where to go. And you just never do. It turns out. It's a real fat bummer. But it's such my sister-in-law just said, I feel like motherhood is just a giant reflection. And it's so true on who you are and what you want and where you're going. And then in the midst of it, you have all these little people watching and learning from you. So it's hard.
I think motherhood, like any highly stressful situation, also has a way of amplifying the broken parts.
Totally.
It makes it harder to mask them, which is why therapy is so important.
Yeah.
How you don't need to answer any questions, okay?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Because I'm pretty open.
Because I don't. Yeah, and I to me, the marriage relationship is very sacred, and so I don't want to dishonor what you and Garen's relationship, but I mean, sleeping in separate bed, like how this has got to be affecting your marriage. Like it can't not, because there's something about sleeping side by side
Mhm.
that even if there's no other connection in the day, to
Mhm.
in my stage of life, which I'm very privileged, when we don't see each other all day and we lie down beside each other,
Mhm.
there's a connection there.
For
So
sure.
what on earth? Like, that's
Yeah.
very messy.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I think one thing again is this is just a phase. Like this is not forevermore that we will not be sleeping in the same bed. And like even we had friends this weekend, so our guest bed was taken, so we slept in the same bed. So it's not like, an everyday forever thing. But I think right now my motto is just whatever gets everyone the most sleep. And I have a newborn.
Smart.
So, this is just, it's not forever. And I will
Huh.
have the rest of my life to sleep with my husband,
So how do you connect with him? Like, what do you do?
I mean, we have our evenings together, which is so nice. So Pepper goes to bed at 7. So we have
Oh,
we
okay.
have 3 hours
Oh,
where
yeah.
we'll do anything together.
Yeah.
And we have the weekends together, and we're very intentional with our weekends. Like Sabbath is very like Sabbath Saturday or Friday night, like we have a supper together, and I'm working on like trying to make that more like celebratory and
Mhm.
special and like significant, because it was very significant for me growing up. So I'm working on doing that. And then on Sabbath, like we always go to like our favorite coffee shop on the way to church, take Pepper to Sabbath school, and like we, rest the whole day essentially together.
Mm.
So I feel like we connect so much in other ways. And
Mhm.
yeah, like sleeping together is really special, but also, we have 2 kids right now that are so young and completely dependent on us, and
Right.
that is our priority together. And
Right.
so I feel like right now it's just, that is where we're at, but we're not going to be there forever. And for me, like it is important. We're adults and we're established, but our
Mhm.
babies are not. And so
Mhm.
that is that I guess just together is our priority in
Mhm.
this phase. But with kids, phases come and go so quickly. So
Yeah.
this will be over soon, and right now I think it's okay.
Yeah. So, Beth, just curious. I mean, what was that like for you during that time?
It's not even fair for me to talk about because I had 3 kids that came home from the hospital and slept. So I mm,
Oh.
yeah. I mean, they like home from the hospital, it was like 4 hours nurse, 4 hours wake up. Like that's
Yeah,
one night,
Really?
that's
one nurse.
how my son is, but Pepper has never been that way.
Yeah. And they were all 3 that way. So I just
Huh.
it was unfairly, that part was unfairly easy. Trust me,
Yeah.
I had a lot of other things. So it wasn't
Right.
like,
But
God knows what you can handle, I guess. I don't know. I hate that I hate that. Rewind that. I don't like saying that. Sorry.
God's gonna walk you through whatever it is.
There you go.
That's the
Yeah,
only
there you
thing.
go.
Do like that. I
'Cause you
believe
know
he's
what?
with us no matter what we go through, but,
There
yeah,
are
the
some
others.
hard things in this life that we can't handle, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also and I will say, I do think that, eventually, and you're absolutely correct, Savannah, you're in a stage, right? Like, you're in a phase that
Mhm.
will pass. Um, I think the one thing that we kept working on was, like, for instance, we had, at one point we're trying to get 3 kids to sleep. The only goal
Yeah.
was to just get them to go to sleep, like, to get
Mhm.
them to sleep like that. So however that was gonna happen, we tried. Listen, everyone has an opinion about sleep time. I get so
Totally.
irritated with that whole thing. Do what works for you and your
Yeah.
family. The
Yeah.
only thing that is that it has to be a husband and wife agreed upon.
Mhm.
Like, you 2 have to come together. It needs to be your goals together.
Mhm.
Um, and because otherwise it's too easy for resentment and other things to come into play. So as long as it's
100%.
but that will be for the next, until, well, when you're grandparents, it's supposed
Forevermore.
to be a
Yeah.
unified thing. So, but so whatever works. And I'm sorry if you're gonna like send us letters about this is the only way to get a baby to sleep. It's going to go in the
Oh,
trash because it's just like,
yeah.
right? Because every single family is different. Every child is different. Every
Mm-hmm.
experience is different. I will say, though, we always had in mind where we were trying to go. So, for instance, if trying to eventually get the kids sleeping in their own beds, right, was like an eventual goal,
Mm-hmm.
then we would always have moments where we introduce that to them. It doesn't mean they weren't in our bed, but it just means like if that was our eventual goal, then we were going to have little moments so that we felt like we were still going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So that
Yeah,
we felt like
totally.
there was a path to where we hope to be one day.
Yeah.
That made the phases easier, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, this is a phase for now, but one day,
One day.
we're going to
Yeah.
tell them, go to bed. We're going to kiss them and they're going to run off to their little beds and climb in and go to sleep.
See, and that will come so soon. So I'm
Yeah.
just not stressed about it.
Yeah.
You don't seem
But-
stressed about anything. Like you, like I am
Oh, that's
in
funny.
awe of you and motherhood. Like holy cow!
Are you stressed about
Oh, that's
anything?
cute.
You don't have to share if you are. You can
Well,
just say.
yeah, I'm like trying to think. I mean, I think life itself is stressful.
Yeah,
Kim, you're looking at me very perplexed. I think life in general is stressful, but I think I don't know. I'm such a different mom than I thought I would be. So,
you're a different person than the person I knew several years ago. Like very, very different. Like I am like,
I really
"Whoa."
am.
Yeah.
I know. And I think that has been hard on my husband, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Because when we first got together, I was like, oh yeah, I want to have kids, but I'm going to work 40 hours a week and we're going to sleep train them and we're going to, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to leave and they'll go to a nanny or whatever. And now I just like laugh at whoever that person was because I am so not that way. I'm like, oh, I could co-sleep till my kids are 15. I'll nurse them till they're 10. I don't care. That's great for me. And so I want to have a homestead, right? Like everything was like so changed. And I think that there's a really great beauty to that because I feel like I'm opening myself up so much more than I was before. And I also think, oh man, this is like a whole other conversation that we could have, but I think that there was a lot of pressure on me, not even from my family. I think it was just pressure that I put on myself to be a certain way or to value certain things. So I think I thought that I wanted to value career more than I really did intrinsically. And then I got married, and I mean, I adore my husband, and I was like so enamored with him when we first got together. So I think that was like that kind of changed things a little bit too for me. And then we had kids, and it was like my whole value, priorities were way shifted around. And yeah, I just think I don't know that I feel as stressed by life maybe as I did before. But I think too, I listened to a podcast. It wasn't yours, sorry. It's a different one. But she was talking about
a lot of podcasts too. So
I love podcasts, honestly, they're so great. But she was talking about having a primary purpose and secondary priorities. And right now, my primary purpose is my family, and everything else is just secondary priorities. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that helps to just put things in perspective a lot. I don't know.
I love seeing parents now. And maybe Beth, you were like this. I mean, it sounds like you were very intentional. Like I was not an intentional mother. I just wanted to be a mother. So,
Yeah.
and I was going to do better than my parents did, like, and I kind of let life lead. But it sounds like you and I have a few clients, and Beth, I hear this from you too. It's you're very intentional in your parenting. I really admire that. And I really think it makes a difference because as I've aged and gotten, healthier emotionally, I do see how the intentionality, like how I parent my parent in very loose quotes, my children now is
Mhm.
very intentional. I'm very intentional, and it's
Yeah.
very hard not to see them as 12 and 10. Well, I mean, even
Yeah.
that. I really work hard at they're 30 and 26. Like, they're not babies anymore. They're not in so I do see that intentionality just makes such a difference in
Mm.
how you do life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it'll be really interesting, like when I get to the stage of life that you're in, and I have no doubt I'll be able to look back and be like, gosh, I wish I had been more intentional, you know? I feel like
Mm,
hindsight is always 2020.
mm,
So, and it, I'm talking about it right now. So it's so
mhm,
different than, if you were to have a camera or fly on the wall throughout the day, it might not look like I'm painting it.
mm.
It is still so messy. And there's
Messy.
moments when I'm cooking and Pepper's pulling on my leg and Monty's crying and I just have to get supper ready and I'm like, Pepper, hold on, and
Mm,
then I get frustrated or like I am not intentional 100% of the time. I try to be, but
right.
life is still happening and it's still messy and I still get, worked up or whatever it is. So it's not perfect, but I do think I've come a long way in just like focusing on how I want to be
Mm,
and like again that 24 hours thing that is so helpful for
yeah.
me to remember like how do I want to respond if this is the only moment that I have with her for, however long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not
Yeah, and
perfect.
I think being intentional too doesn't mean that all of those moments are smooth. It just means that
Mm,
you sometimes later that night, sometimes a month later,
Yeah.
whatever it is, you're still aware of those moments and aware of what's going on and kind of working through how you were feeling in that moment, what brought you to
Hmm.
that moment. And, sometimes you learn from it. Sometimes you beat yourself up and because we're normal. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have grace, for yourself.
Yeah.
And but I think
Mm.
that's being intentional. Am I right, Kim?
Yeah.
It's not so
I mean,
much
that's what makes sense. What I'm hearing all of us saying is, let's just give ourselves permission. Let's be intentional and give ourselves permission that it's going to be messy. I mean, Brene Brown, that's one
Yeah.
of her favorite things to do is she tells people, write yourself a permission slip.
Yeah.
I Kim Cove give Kim Cove permission to have a
Mhm.
messy life.
I think that is right now, I am learning so much about God's grace in this season
Mm,
of my life. Like, it has never felt more real to me than in this season. Like, I'm learning so much about who God is and his faithfulness and his goodness and his grace because that is just, there's no other phase of my life I feel like where I've needed that and leaned on it more than this
mm,
season.
hmm. So
I
take it, learning more about his grace, does then that allow you to give yourself
Yes,
grace?
100%, 100%,
Because that's not for everybody. A lot of people will, we talk about
for
God's
sure.
grace and God gives us grace, but then we still have to be perfect for
I
ourselves.
I think
Hmm.
it's also a great, at least for me, this was a wonderful time where I started really understanding more about God's love. Like not
Hmm.
just grace as in he's, I mean, I know some people
Mhm.
those two things are so intertwined and they are, but it wasn't just about, um grace in the sense that he has forgiven me, right? But just that like cuz the way you think about your children right now, like even when Pepper is pulling on your leg and upset or doing whatever, like you never look at Pepper and say, you know, why aren't you just acting like you're 25 already?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like you ne- like you might be frustrated at the situation, right? But you're
Hmm.
not like
Yeah.
mad at her. You adore her. Like you adore
Right.
her.
Yeah.
And to understand that my when I was in that stage to understand that my love for my kids and even now is
Yeah.
so great
Hmm.
and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what they do and do not do.
Hmm.
100%. 100%.
And to be
Mhm.
able to understand that God's love, like I am a sorry specimen of a human being and he is God, right? So
Mm.
so that just means that he loves us so much more and so much more purely. And
Mhm.
yet than how I love my kids. And yet,
Mhm.
man,
Mhm.
the way I love them still to this day
Mm.
is, remarkable.
It's
And it still
incredible.
has
Yeah.
absolutely nothing to do with what they do and do not do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about the moments that are just well, I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. That make your heart swell with like you can't contain the joy.
Mm.
Yesterday, I was working with a man, and I'm an EMDR therapist, and we were actually installing positive moments where he felt connected to his
Mm.
children and to his wife. And it was moving to watch
Mm.
that really impact
Happen.
his whole being. So let's go there. Let's talk about those moments when Savannah, go. go go talk about the joy of
Begin.
it.
Oh, it is so remarkable that we give birth to these babies that just become that are their own person, you know? And so I think right now where I find so much joy is Pepper is just discovering the world and everything is worthy of celebration.
Mhm.
And that is just so fun. Like she finds a rock and there is no other rock like this rock. It is the rock, right? And it's like in a sea of gravel, but it's this one that's just like so fabulous. Or like we have, one of our closest friends came over the weekend and or the week, and so spending time with them and then watching her interact and
Mm.
like communicate and be curious and like hug them and play with them or like take their hand and lead them somewhere, right?
Oh, that's
Like
precious.
my grandma said one time, when you have a baby, it is like there is no other baby in the world. Nobody else is
Mm.
doing what your baby's doing. And it's so true. Like
Mhm.
I watch her bend down and pick something up. Like just that can make me cry. Like I just think she's amazing. And she's not doing anything that's novel from the outside in. But like, oh my gosh, just that brings me so much joy. Just watching her at all. Just
Mm.
being with her or napping with her, like watching her sleep. This girl who's adventurous and curious and running around all the time to just be so exhausted 4 hours into the day because of how much she's done that she's just like, mouth agape, laying sprawled out on the bed. It just makes you want to melt.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it brings me so much joy. Just existing in her world is just so fun. And then, our little one is right now just starting to like do those little social smiles. And that
Mm.
is just, I mean, that'll just kill you.
Mhm.
Or all of his rolls. That brings me a lot of joy
Oh,
right now
his
too. His,
his
his
little squishy,
chunky
you
little
just wanna
thighs.
eat 'em.
Oh my
You
gosh,
just
he's
wanna
so
chew on 'em.
chunky. Yeah, yeah. I'm finding so much joy. I feel like in this part of motherhood, so much.
Have you noticed any times, and obviously this is gonna be more with Pepper, um, where she is like you or like Garen?
She's very much like me in that she knows what she wants and she will get it. So watch out. I feel like in that respect, she's like me. She's like Garen in that she's very musically inclined, I think. Like
Oh,
she
neat.
loves, I sound like such a mom. She loves music. She's so musical. But she is. She dances anytime music's on. Like in Sabbath school, all
Oh.
the kids are singing and she's just dancing.
Oh, fun.
And she's also very sweet natured, which I think I have, but Garen really has.
Mm.
And so she's very, I feel like very like tender hearted And I think she's very sensitive, which probably what 16 months old isn't. But I feel
Right.
like that's a lot of me also, being
Mm.
like her sensitivity.
Mhm.
But it's all still unraveling. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be different next week. Who
I
knows?
I wish people could see your face when you said that, because it's like you have the wonder and the excitement
Mm,
of what tomorrow brings.
Well, they can. All they
yeah.
have to do is go watch this on YouTube. Just a little
Cute little
plug.
plug. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, and we need to wrap it up here in a second, but before we go, for a mother who's
Mm.
pregnant right now with her first,
Mm.
what's one thing you would
Oh,
say
that
to
gives me.
her?
Oh, see, that just makes me want to cry. Just even thinking about our friend that came is 10 weeks pregnant. She just told us that she's
Oh,
pregnant. So, oh man, I think just honestly that it will be okay. Like, there's so much fear and like even right now, like just talking about how hard it is just so wonderful and it will be okay. Like
mm.
every season of life, I think just has so much joy and so many weeds. But I think if you're intentional about being present with it
Mm.
and really just, opening your heart and opening your arms to what it has to offer, like it will just be so much greater than you could ever imagine and not wishing time away, like really just
Mhm.
being where you are and if there's a hard day, like there will be another one and it will be okay. Like you will be okay. And I feel like God has chosen each one of us for the paths that we are on
Mhm.
and reminding yourself that like I am here for a purpose and this baby was designed just for me and I was designed just for this baby
Mm.
and it will all be okay.
Hmm.
Kim, what would you say?
Oh. That's a sorry, we're not supposed to be this quiet. I'm thinking.
It's okay.
Um, pr- probably, um, probably give yourself grace
Yeah.
Yeah.
that it's not going to be perfect, and you don't have to be perfect,
Hmm.
and you can just when it's a messy day, just let it be messy,
Yeah.
and when it's not a messy day, then
Rejoice.
it's not a messy day, and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And there are no rules, and just you do you, and what you're doing is exactly what you need to
Yeah.
be doing. Oh, and
Hmm.
what just came to mind. You know your baby better than anybody.
Mhm.
You
Amen.
know your baby better than the pediatrician knows your baby, better than
Hmm.
your grandmother knows your baby, better than your mother, better than the nanny, better than the father. Sorry.
Hmm.
Love the fathers. You know
Hmm.
your baby.
Hmm.
Trust your gut.
Yes.
I agree. I would add, listen to your husband because he is the father. And I think the father is a very important has a very important perspective on both us and them. And so I agree that because you're with them so much of the time. But at least listen
Especially when they're
openly.
older. As they age, as your
List
Hmm.
yeah.
children age, dad's influence becomes more and more and
Yeah.
more
Hmm.
But
important.
definitely listen with an open heart and an
Yeah.
open
Hmm.
mind and be willing to really hear them. So the one thing I would say is I really I survived because I knew God was walking through it with me day in and
Mm.
day out. And I believe that more than anything. And I think one of the best things I ever did was one day when I was feeling very drained and I walked out and I'm trying to put clothes on, that's a hard thing some days. And I'm walking out into the living room and all the 3 kids are there and it's a disaster. And I'm just feeling like I'm already starting this day behind. And I had been really yearning for time with God, and that hadn't happened. And what you hear is people say, well, you just have to get up before your children. Oh, please. Like, that's the most ridiculous thing. For me, it was. Anyway. And so I remember that morning looking at those 3 kids and saying, "Dear Jesus, please speak to me and minister to me as I go about my day with these children, and help me to see you and experience you and learn something about you today as I am mother to these children, because I just don't have 5 more minutes." And it was, and I would pray that every day, even if it was just like silently, just a thought. But it really became a beautiful practice to watch for, to learn about him as I was going about my day. And sometimes it was clip, clop, goes small donkey's hoofs as it slowly climbs the last hill. I don't know, that one in the little red book.
I do.
Maybe, but whatever it was that I was doing with my children, or being outside in nature with them, like taking walks and doing things. But God just kept showing up in powerful and beautiful ways. And the relationship with him just continued to grow, even though I spent very little time just alone with my Bible and with him. And so, if you're in that crazy desert time, whether or not it's because of kids or other reasons, cry out to him to speak to you, because he does not need us to have a perfect chair with a perfect book and a perfect, like the perfect scenario. He can show up and speak to us no matter. So
True.
anyway, all right. Last question, and we all answer it. In the last 24 hours, what's something that's brought you joy, laughter, or a smile? Kim, you already know what yours is, so why don't you go first?
Okay. So this is the best thing ever. And Savannah, sister, this is for you as well. Okay. Because you are a psychologist. Okay. So yesterday I was reading in Matthew 10, verse 35, and it was talking about, and this is actually more than 24 hours, but who cares? It was talking about how Jesus was teaching, preaching, and healing. So I want to know what those words mean. So I go to the original Greek and I look up what those words mean, and then I get to the word healing. This will make me cry. And the Greek word for healing is spelled THERAPEUO. Exactly.
Oh my word.
Exactly. And it means to serve and to heal. Then this morning, so
Okay, go back to how it is spelled again, because for a dyslexic person who has a really hard time seeing a word that is just spelled out, explain that.
Well, it's therapy without the Y and an E instead, and then a UO at the end. And that is the word that is translated healing.
Wow.
And that's Jesus. So then this morning, first verse in chapter 10 of Matthew says, Jesus gave his disciples authority, which means influence and privilege, to cast out unclean spirits. And when I looked that up, the unclean, well, that like unclean is either in the moral sense or the ceremonial sense. But the spirit is the word for breath, but also it means an essence and a power over someone. And I was just thinking, that is what, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound arrogant, but that is what I do every single day. Is I work with people to cast out the lies that the devil has used to beat them down. And I just, I know I'm crying, but I want to tell every therapist out there, we are doing the work of Jesus himself. And it was just such a wonderful, it just felt, I'm crying, but there's joy. These are joyful tears.
They are joyful tears.
Okay,
that's awesome, Kim.
And honestly, Kim, you do it so well.
Thank you.
All right, Savannah.
That is so wild. I'm gonna have to chew on that. That's so cool. What was it? Joy, laughter,
Joy, laughter, or a smile.
or smile. Well, I mentioned this several times now, but our really close friends came over the past few days, and they're just those friends that you only have like a few times in life, and when you do, you just want to hold on to them so tight. And so they're like family, and they came, and last night we played this balderdash.
Oh yeah.
And it was so fun, and we just like laughed so hard that I like needed ibuprofen because my head hurt so bad. It was just so wonderful to just for a second like laugh unabashedly and with people who you love so much and can just, be yourself and have no qualms about it. It was so refreshing, and I feel so rejuvenated from our time together, and it was just a wonderful, 3 days, far more than 24 hours. It was so wonderful. So that gave me so much joy, just being with people that I love so much that I don't get the chance to be with very often.
That's awesome.
Sounds delightful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, mine's not nearly as profound or whatever as your guys's, but it's important to remember it's in the little things too. So we had a neighbor who got mulch. And for those of you who don't know, our new place is like we're all right next to each other, all stacked up on top of each other. So there's very little space between us and neighbors. So anyway, our neighbor bought mulch and had someone come and spread it throughout their yard, and they filled it with a huge pile. So they've started sharing with all of the neighbors, and they, said they sent a text to my husband and said, well, if you're welcome to come get it, but we need to have this done by such and such time or whatever. And Chris wasn't able to. And I said, well, I can do it. Our house is up on top of a hill. Their house is below it. And so it'd be huffing wheelbarrows of mulch up the hill. And so anyway, I went and I had errands I had to do and a meeting I had to go to. And then when I got home, it was going to go right to that. And I get out of my car, and one of the neighbors, the other one, is standing right beside my car. And he says, very soft spoken. He's a real tall man, but very soft spoken. He said, so where do you want your mulch? I'm going to bring it up for you. Where would you like me to put it? And I said, oh, no. I just got home. I just need to run change my clothes. And then I can do it. No, it's really hard. I'm going to do it for you. And I said, well, I guess just anywhere in the front bed. Like you just make one big pile in the front bed. That's fine. Then I turn, and the other neighbor is the one that we're getting the mulch from, is just down the hill. And he says, I've been playing phone tag with your husband. But where would you like the mulch? I'm just going to bring it up for you. And I said, I can't handle all this kindness from my neighbors. I said, Amos, my other neighbor, just said he was going to do it for me. And so anyway, he said, well, between the two of us, we're bringing up your mulch for you.
That's really neat.
Yeah. And about an hour later, I had mulch all over the thing. Now I needed to get a little bit more. So the next morning, I was so proud of myself. I went down and hauled up about 6 wheelbarrowfuls of mulch.
Wow.
And hauled it up the hill myself and spread it all. So
you go.
Yeah. I love going, whoa, I am woman. But anyway.
Do you notice how each of our joys has to do with connection? Mine just happened to be connection with God, and yours, Savannah's connection with friends, and yours, Beth, is connection with neighbors.
We say that all the time. It's one of the most important things for producing joy. That I think about that connection, laughter. We've talked about that being so important. And Savannah, that was yours. And obviously, spending time with God and what we learned from him. So anyway, Savannah, thank you so much for being on here.
Fabulous.
Open.
So fun.
I am sure there are lots of young moms who are going to appreciate the things that you had to say. But I think most importantly, as we leave, I think all three of us would definitely say, listen, give yourself grace and navigate these years, understanding you will have weeds and you will have joy, but know that you were chosen to be your child's mother, whether or not you birthed them or adopted them or whatever
Foster
the
them.
case may, or foster them, whatever the case may be, and just know that you were chosen for them. So God's got you, and he'll be with you in this process. And there isn't any perfect way of doing it. It's just, sometimes it's just get through. So
Sure.
and this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And hey, Savannah, just hang on for a second after we do the outro anyway. But yeah, thank you all for listening. And hey, go out and find some joy in the midst of the weeds. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We would really love to hear from you. So please find us. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Joy in the Weeds. You can also email us. Our email address is joy@carolinasda.org. That's joy@carolinasda.org. Now, we hope that today, as you navigate the weeds, you will also hold on to moments of joy. This podcast is a production of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.